Welcome back to another lesson on research methodology. Today we'll look at participant and non-participant observation. I remind you that this is part of syllabus Cambridge O-Level Sociology 2251, where we look at different forms of observation as methods of data collection. Interpretive sociologists, who are more likely to use observation, believe that human behavior can best be understood by observing rather than asking questions. They believe that people may not tell the truth, or forget, or even lie, as they do not want to be seen in a negative light. Therefore, observation could help the researcher to get better understanding of the situation without having to ask questions. Observation depends on the ability of the researcher and his skills for observation. Two people may see the same thing but may not come to the same conclusion, or they may come to different conclusions. But they are both right because they are seeing two different aspects of the same thing that they are observing. People usually focus on one aspect at a time, and their perception is sometimes colored by their preferences. So, therefore, observation is not an easy task, and researchers should develop the skills for observation if they want to do a good study. What I meant is that observation is often selective. We do not all see the same thing. Look at the picture and tell me what you see. I'll leave it for some time for you to observe it. So what do you see? An old woman walking or a person staring at you? Look carefully. There's always an issue of reliability and validity with all the methods of data collection. You should be getting used to these terms, reliability and validity, by now. Because it's difficult to verify the findings of the observer, the positivists believe that the methods of observation lacks reliability. What it means that it is difficult to replicate and verify. Anti-positivists, on the other hand, believe that it enables the researcher to get more valid information, that is, come closer to truth, which may not be possible through a one-off study. Let us now look at two types of observations: participant observation and non-participant observation. The observer is part of the group which hangs around a coffee shop in the evening, or the observer is at a distance, observing how people behave and what they normally do hanging at the coffee shop in the evening. You see it in the picture above. The first one, obviously, when the observer is part of the group, it is a participant observation. And the other one, where the observer is at a distance, observing people but not being part of the group, is an example of a non-participant observation. So, what is a participant observation? A participant observation is one where the sociologist is part of the group she or he is researching. Most of the time, she is known to be an outsider, interested in research, and allowed to take an active role in the day-to-day activities of the group. For example, a participant observer can take the role of a teacher in a school and study teachers and teaching over a long period of time by being part of that school. Let us take an example of participant observation, which is often cited in sociology textbooks. William Foote White, study of Italian street gangs in the 1940s. He assumed the role in the group and hung around with them for a long time. He was friendly to Doc, the gang leader. He lived with the Italian gang for 4 years while trying to research their way of life and the problems of the first generation and second generation Italian immigrants in Boston, USA. So you understand why it was a participant observation, because he stayed with them and spent a lot of time engaged with activities in the group. Another example of participant observation is a study called Tally's Corner. Elliot Libo, the researcher, studied Negro street corner men. It was conducted in the 1960s. It was an insight into the lives of Negro families in poverty, especially Negro men who he felt were neglected in research on poverty at a time when America was trying to tackle the problem of poverty. This is another example of participant observation which you might enjoy listening to. Sudhir Venkatesh, a young sociologist, conducted a participant observation by being with a drug gang in Chicago. Sudhir befriended JT, a gang leader for the Black Kings, as he slowly gained JT's trust. One day, in order to convince Sudhir of his own CEO-like qualities, JT makes him leader for the gang for a day. In his research, Sudhir describes his time living with the gang on the south side of Chicago and explained what it is like to live in hell. The problem with such studies, obviously you must have guessed, occur when a researcher is asked to engage in activities that may put his life in danger. In fact, Sudhir Venkatesh had to leave when the FBI decided to crack down on the gang. Exciting, isn't it? But obviously not easy to do. We'll now look at the types of participant observation. Look at the pictures above. One is where everybody is openly together. The other one seems to be somebody who has got a hidden identity. Well, in participant observation, it can be a overt study where the observer's identity as a researcher and the purpose of the study is known. And another one called a covert study where the researcher's identity is hidden from those he is studying. Let us now look at overt participant observation. As we said, an overt study, overt means open, is one where the identity and purpose of the study is known. People being studied are aware of the role of the researcher and understand that he may not engage in everything they are doing. In fact, even for the researcher to get into the group takes a long time because he has to befriend those people, the members of the group, and to get acquainted to them before starting the study. For instance, Elliot Libo took 2 months to hang out with Tally, one of the group member, before he got access. That is why his study is called Tally's Corner. Once accepted, it becomes easier for the researcher to conduct his study. The researcher may ask questions or clarification, and the researcher is not forced to engage in all the activities of the group. The other form of participant observation is the covert participant observation. Covert means hidden. the researcher's identity is hidden from those he is studying. This is necessary because people engaged in some activities would not wish to be observed or known to others. It is more likely to be used in studies of deviant or criminal groups, where some people or group may deny access to others. Thus, covert approach is unavoidable. For instance, a researcher who was known as James Patrick, which was not his true name, studying violent Glasgow gangs, had to keep his true name a secret as his life would be in danger if his true identity was known. Another one, William Chambliss, kept his identity secret while studying organized crime in Seattle. It is obvious that such studies cannot be carried out using overt participant observation, and therefore covert participant observation is the best option. Often you will be asked, why covert participant observation? It is interesting to note that sociologists would prefer to use overt methods where they are known and they are accepted in a group, but they are sometimes forced to adopt a covert method. Thus, covert methods are equally necessary where studies cannot be carried out using overt approaches for reasons that I explained to you earlier why a covert participant observation is preferred sometimes. Let us now look at the advantages of participant observation. First, participant observation provides deeper understanding. It helps the sociologist to have a deeper understanding of the problem by being close to those she is studying for a long time. Often, people do not tell everything, withhold information from researchers. In a participant observation, the researcher is able to get deeper understanding without having to ask too many questions. Another advantage of participant observation is that it has greater validity. Deeper understanding is possible with this method, and therefore it has greater validity for the interpretive sociologist, obviously. The sociologist is able to get a true picture of the people and problems he is studying by being present and by engaging in the life of those he is researching. William White, for instance, spent 4 years developing close understanding of the Italian street gang. Venkatesh spent 8 months with the gang in Chicago. Questionnaire and interviews, on the other hand, give only partial pictures, and it depends on the person answering the question and his willingness to tell the truth. Interpretive sociologists believe that participant observation allows the researcher to discover how people feel, their subjective viewpoint, that is, the way they see themselves. Positivists do not go as deep and are criticized for trying to understand people from outside with the help of a questionnaire, but people may not always tell the truth, or where the questions are decided beforehand by the researcher and which doesn't allow him to probe as deep as a participant observer. Therefore, when compared to quantitative methods such as questionnaires, which have more reliability, can be more easily replicated, participant observation has more validity. In other words, it helps the researcher to probe deeper and to go closer to truth. Let us now look at some of the limitations or disadvantages of participant observation. Parts of observation relies on the ability of the researcher to conduct observation, and this is not an easy method to handle. The sample is very small and therefore difficult to generalize to a larger group. Obviously, this is a criticism coming from the positivist. It is time consuming. It is almost impossible to replicate, therefore, it lacks reliability. It takes time to negotiate access and gain trust of the people. We saw this from the examples we took earlier. Covered parts of observation may be risky. For instance, it is quite difficult to take notes without being noticed or arousing suspicion. They are obviously risky because of the nature of the studies where covered parts observation is used. The researcher may also arouse more suspicion if he refuses to engage in some activities. Before ending, let's look at another form of observation, which we call the non-participant observation. Who is a non-participant observer? A non-participant observer is a researcher who is known to the group, but he or she does not participate in the group she or he is studying. It allows the researcher to observe without influencing the behavior of those she is studying or researching. However, it takes time for the group to get accustomed with the researcher and not to see her as a stranger in the group. She should not be seen as a stranger in the group that she is studying. We say like a fly on the wall. Why a fly on the wall? Because a fly is usually there and nobody notices whether it is there or not. And the researcher also should be like that. Even if she is there, people should behave normally in her presence. A non-participant observer may also collect quantitative data, such as the number of times an event occurs in the classroom she is observing. However, the researcher may not be able to ask questions and clarifications. An example of a non-participant observation was the one carried out by David Hargreaves, who conducted classroom observation. You'll recall that we talked about it in a previous lesson. So here we are, we have reached the end of this lesson on observation. We looked at observation in general, the types of observation, participant, non-participant, overt and covert observation, and the advantages and limitations of the different types of observations with examples. Let us now look at some of the questions you might get on this topic. What is a participant observation or a non-participant observation? 2 marks. I have put it the same question, but obviously it is 2 questions. What is a covert or overt participant observation? 2 marks. Same thing. It might be 2 questions. What are the practical problems of conducting participant observation? 8 marks. What are the differences between a participant and a non-participant observation? 8 marks. Give 2 benefits and 2 limitations of participant observation. 10 marks. Why do researchers prefer overt participant observation? 8 marks. Differentiate between an overt and a covert participant observation. 8 marks. It is not ethical to conduct covert participant observation, therefore it should be abandoned. 15 marks. Remember, for such questions, you should not get trapped with how the question is written. In fact, you should be able to show what is an overt pattern observation, why do we use it, under what circumstances, and the advantages of overt pattern observation, and why researchers have to resort to it. Therefore, despite having disadvantages or problems, we have to maintain it. We have reached the end of this lesson on observation. May I remind you that the pictures and presentation in this lesson were taken from open sources, upslash.com, freeimages.com, and pexels.com. If you have any question, you can still write to me on omvarma2011@gmail.com. It was nice talking to you. See you soon. From me, it's goodbye.